Karen Middleton stood on her perfectly manicured lawn at 6:47 am, holding a measuring tape and a clipboard, when she witnessed the first violation. A military transport truck, massive olive green, and absolutely not mentioned in Section 4.7 of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association bylaws, rumbled down Maple Street and parked directly across from her house. The second shock came when she marched over to confront the driver, only to discover it wasn't just any truck. It was carrying classified equipment for a new Army Reserve training facility being established in the abandoned lot behind the subdivision. The third and most outrageous violation occurred when Colonel James Harrison, a decorated veteran with 30 years of service, had the audacity to tell her that federal property took precedence over HOA regulations. "Excuse me, Colonel," Karen said, her voice reaching that particular octave that had made 3 different Starbucks baristas quit their jobs. "But I am the elected president of this HOA, and military or not, you will follow our community standards." Colonel Harrison, weathered by deployments in 3 different countries, looked genuinely bewildered. "Ma'am, we're setting up a small communications outpost. It's temporary and completely legal under federal jurisdiction." Temporary. Karen's eyes narrowed as she flipped through her laminated copy of the HOA handbook. Section 12.3 clearly states that any vehicles over 8 feet in height require a permit and a $200 daily parking fee. That truck is at least 12 feet tall. "Ma'am, with all due respect, federal operations aren't subject to." "I don't care if you're the president himself," Karen interrupted, her perfectly styled blonde bob quivering with indignation. "Rules are rules, and I spent 6 years turning this neighborhood from a collection of poorly maintained houses into a pristine community with property values that have increased 47%. The standoff lasted exactly 4 minutes before Karen produced her phone and began recording. "This is Karen Middleton, HOA president of Willowbrook Estates, documenting federal overreach and blatant disregard for community standards. The time is 6:51 am, and I am being intimidated by military personnel who refuse to respect our legally binding covenants." Colonel Harrison rubbed his temples. In Afghanistan, he'd negotiated with warlords. In Iraq, he'd managed supply lines under enemy fire, but nothing in his military training had prepared him for Karen Middleton holding a laminated rule book like it was the Constitution itself. "Look, Mrs. Middleton, we can discuss this reasonably. It's Ms. Middleton, and no, we cannot," she snapped. "You have exactly 24 hours to relocate your unauthorized vehicle, pay the accumulated fines, and submit a proper application for any future military activities in our community. Otherwise, I'm calling my attorney, the mayor, and Channel 7 News." As Karen marched back to her house, her sensible flats clicking against the sidewalk with military precision, she missed the knowing look that passed between Colonel Harrison and his sergeant. They'd dealt with insurgents who were less determined than the woman who just threatened to take on the United States Army over a parking violation. But Karen Middleton hadn't become HOA president by backing down from fights. She'd earned her position through pure, uncompromising dedication to rules, order, and the unwavering belief that her way was not only the right way, it was the only way. The war for Willowbrook Estates had officially begun. By noon, Karen had already filed complaints with the city council, the state representatives, and somehow managed to get through to a very confused intern at the Pentagon. She stood in her kitchen, surrounded by printed emails, legal documents, and a whiteboard covered in what could only be described as a military-style tactical plan for HOA enforcement. "Mom, you're literally trying to fight the army," her daughter Jessica said over FaceTime, her voice a mixture of amusement and concern. "Don't you think you're taking this a bit too far?" "Jessica Marie, I didn't raise you to be a quitter," Karen replied, not looking up from her computer screen where she was drafting a formal cease and desist letter. "If we allow one military truck to park without permits, what's next? Food trucks? Moving vans? Ice cream trucks playing music after 8 p.m. The doorbell rang, and Karen found herself face to face with not just Colonel Harrison, but an entire delegation, a base commander, a legal affairs officer, and a woman in civilian clothes who introduced herself as a federal mediator. "Ms. Middleton," the base commander began, "I'm General Patricia Walsh. I understand there's been some confusion about our temporary operations here." "No confusion at all," Karen replied crisply. "You're in violation of our community standards, and I have documentation proving it." She produced a thick folder with color-coded tabs. "I've also discovered that your temporary facility lacks proper environmental impact assessments, noise ordinance compliance, and you haven't submitted the required landscaping plans." General Walsh blinked slowly. In her 25-year career, she'd never encountered anyone who'd researched military operations quite this thoroughly. "Ms. Middleton, we appreciate your diligence, but this is a matter of national security. And this is a matter of property values and community standards," Karen shot back. "I scheduled a town hall meeting for tomorrow evening. Every resident in Willowbrook Estates will hear about how the military thinks it can ignore local regulations." The federal mediator stepped forward. "Perhaps we can reach a compromise." "I don't compromise on rules," Karen said, "but I'm not unreasonable. You want to use our neighborhood? Fine. Pay the fees, follow the regulations, and show some respect for the community standards we've worked years to establish." What happened next surprised everyone, including Karen herself. Colonel Harrison, who'd been quietly observing, suddenly smiled. "You know what, Ms. Middleton? You're absolutely right." The room fell silent. "Ma'am?" General Walsh looked at her subordinate with concern. "She's right," Harrison repeated. "If we expect civilian communities to support military operations, we should show them the same respect they show us. What would it cost to bring everything up to HOA standards?" Karen's prepared arguments died in her throat. She'd been ready for a fight, not agreement. "Well," she said slowly, consulting her clipboard, "the permit fees would be $200 per day per oversized vehicle. Landscaping requirements include native plants with proper irrigation, noise restrictions after 9 p.m., and all personnel must park in designated areas only." "Done," Harrison said. "What else?" You're serious?" "Get serious. In fact, I'd like to invite you to tour our facility tomorrow. Maybe you can help us make sure we're meeting all local standards." Karen felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Someone was actually taking her seriously. Not just humoring her or trying to get around her, but genuinely respecting her expertise. "That's acceptable," she said, trying to maintain her composure while mentally recalculating her entire strategy. But as the military delegation left, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that Colonel Harrison's easy capitulation was just another tactical maneuver. The question was, what was he really planning? The next morning, Karen arrived at the military facility dressed in her finest business attire, clipboard in hand, ready to document every possible violation. What she found instead was Colonel Harrison directing soldiers in planting native Missouri wildflowers, according to the exact specifications outlined in the HOA landscaping guidelines. "Morning, Ms. Middleton," Harrison called out. "Sergeant Rodriguez here has been studying your soil composition requirements. Turns out you really know your stuff." Karen stood frozen, watching uniformed personnel carefully measuring plant spacing and installing decorative border stones that perfectly matched the neighborhood aesthetic. "You actually read the guidelines?" "Every page," Harrison confirmed. "Your section on erosion control is particularly impressive. Where did you learn about sustainable landscaping practices?" For the first time in years, someone was asking about her expertise rather than complaining about her rules. "I have a master's degree in environmental planning," she said quietly. "I used to work for the county before I focused on the HOA full-time." "That explains a lot," Harrison nodded. "These regulations aren't just arbitrary rules. They're actually well-designed environmental protocols. We could use someone with your knowledge on our base planning committee." Karen felt something crack inside her chest. When was the last time someone had called her knowledge valuable rather than obsessive? The tour continued, and Karen found herself genuinely impressed. The communication equipment was state-of-the-art, the soldiers were professional and respectful, and Harrison had already implemented noise-dampening measures that exceeded HOA requirements. "Why are you doing all this?" she finally asked. You could have just ignored me, gone over my head to the city. Harrison paused by a newly planted oak sapling. Because you were right, and I was wrong. Military or not, we're part of this community now. Your residents deserve to have their standards respected. But, he smiled. But I do have a favor to ask. Karen tensed, waiting for the catch she'd been expecting all along. We're having some issues with the base across town. The neighborhood there has been less welcoming. Vandalism, complaints, protests. The base commander there thinks the community is just being difficult, but after working with you, I suspect they might have legitimate concerns that nobody's listening to. Karen raised an eyebrow. You want me to help you deal with another HOA? I want you to help us be better neighbors, Harrison corrected. Think of it as consulting work, paid consulting work. For the first time in 6 years, Karen Middleton found herself speechless. Someone was offering to pay her for the skills she'd developed as HOA president, the skills that everyone else treated like an annoying hobby. There's just one condition, Harrison added with a grin. You have to promise not to charge us $200 a day for our vehicles over there. Karen almost smiled back. Almost. I'll consider it, she said. But first, I need to see your environmental impact assessment for that oak tree. The root system could potentially interfere with underground utilities if it's not properly planned. As Harrison dutifully produced the requested documentation, neither of them noticed the black sedan that had been parked across the street for the past hour, or the woman inside taking photographs with a telephoto lens. Karen Middleton had just become a person of interest to some very powerful people who didn't appreciate HOA presidents who could successfully negotiate with the military. The real battle was about to begin.